Here's a number that reframes everything you think you know about the people around you. According to research from the Pew Research Center, only 11% of Americans born into the lowest income bracket ever make it to the upper income tier in their lifetime. 11%. Which means the gap between the class you were born into and the class you're trying to reach is not primarily a gap of effort or intelligence or even opportunity. It is a gap of language. A specific, unwritten, almost invisible behavioral code that upper-class people learn so early and so unconsciously that most of them cannot even articulate it when asked. They just know how to move through the world in a way that opens doors, commands rooms, and signals belonging, without ever saying a single word about money. And once you learn to read that code, two things happen simultaneously. You stop letting it make you feel less than, and you start using the parts of it that actually serve you. There is a version of this conversation that is designed to make you feel bad, to show you everything you were not given and leave you there. That is not what we are doing today. Because the truth about upper-class behavior, when you strip away the mythology and look at the psychology underneath, is that most of it is learnable, not all of it. The safety net of inherited wealth and generational connections is real, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. But the behavioral signals, the way they carry themselves, the way they speak, the way they react to problems and authority and time itself, those are patterns. And patterns can be studied, understood, and deliberately adopted by anyone willing to see them clearly. We are going to go through 6 specific habits today, not as a checklist of things to envy, as a decoder ring for a language you have been surrounded by your entire life without anyone handing you the translation. And at the end, we are going to be honest about which parts of this code are worth learning, and which parts are simply the costume of people who have never had to worry about the ground. Before we get into the first habit, if this is the kind of content that makes you think differently about money and class and the unwritten rules nobody teaches you, hit subscribe. We do this every week. No sponsorships, no shortcuts, just the real framework. Now let's get into it. The first habit is what looks like bad taste but is actually the most sophisticated signal in the room. Walk into any genuinely upper-class environment and you will find people dressed in ways that should not work. Tattered college sweatshirts in 5-star hotels. Worn boat shoes at black tie-adjacent events. Unremarkable clothing in rooms full of people trying very hard to look remarkable. This is not accidental, and it is not modesty. It is the costume of someone who has never needed clothes to do the talking for them. Here is the psychological mechanism underneath it. People who grew up without financial security learned early that appearance is armor. You wear your best shoes to the doctor because you know that if you look like you don't belong, the system treats you accordingly. That is not paranoia. That is an accurate read of how class bias operates in institutional settings. Upper-class people were never taught that lesson because they never needed it. Their belonging was assumed before they walked in the room. So clothing became a choice rather than a shield. Comfort over impression. Always. The concrete takeaway from this habit is not to dress badly. It is to audit which of your appearance decisions are being made for you versus for other people. Every dollar spent on visible status signaling, logos, labels, anything designed to communicate wealth to strangers, is a dollar that is doing social work instead of financial work. The upper class figured out long ago that the people worth impressing already know. Everyone else does not matter. But here's where it gets interesting. The second habit is the one that reveals the deepest class divide of all, and it has nothing to do with money directly. It is the relationship with time. Specifically, which tense people live in. Pay close attention to conversation at different class levels and a pattern emerges so consistent it becomes almost eerie. Working class conversation lives in the present and the past. How exhausted we are from today. What the boss said yesterday. That summer 10 years ago when things felt easier. This is not a failure of imagination. It is the natural result of financial pressure. When you are managing genuine scarcity, when the weird noise your car makes actually matters because you cannot afford a repair, your brain has no bandwidth for the decade ahead. It is using everything it has just to navigate the week. Upper-class conversation lives almost entirely in the future tense. Where are we going next winter? What does the market look like in 5 years? Which school positions the kids best for 2030? They are not smarter. They are not more disciplined. They are not thinking longer term because of superior character. They are thinking longer term because financial security buys cognitive bandwidth. Wealth is not just money. It is the mental space to plan. Research from Princeton economist Angus Deaton, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on consumption and poverty, found that financial scarcity consumes the equivalent of 13 IQ points of cognitive bandwidth. 13 points. Not because poor people are less intelligent, because managing scarcity is a full-time cognitive job that leaves less room for everything else. The takeaway here is specific and actionable. 10 minutes a week of deliberate future tense thinking, not worrying about the future but planning for it, begins to rewire the cognitive habit regardless of your current financial situation. It is a muscle, and like every muscle, it responds to use. The third habit is the one that is hardest to watch and hardest to fake. Upper-class people have what can only be described as radical low urgency. When something goes wrong, a flight delay, a restaurant mistake, a contractor who does not show up, their reaction is almost alien to anyone who has experienced real financial precarity. They do not tighten. Their voice does not change. They do not scramble. They move slowly, speak calmly, and treat the problem as a logistical inconvenience rather than a threat. This is not Zen mastery. This is not superior emotional regulation. This is the behavioral expression of a safety net. When a burst pipe is an inconvenience rather than a financial catastrophe, your nervous system responds accordingly. When a flight delay costs you nothing because your schedule has buffer built into it, urgency has nowhere to attach. The calmness is real, but it is downstream of security, not upstream of it. Understanding this distinction is important because it means the goal is not to perform calmness you do not feel. The goal is to build enough financial buffer that genuine calmness becomes available to you. Even 1 month of expenses in an untouched savings account measurably changes how your nervous system responds to unexpected problems. The safety net does not have to be generational to change your behavior. It just has to exist. But here's where it gets interesting. The fourth habit is the most frustrating to witness and the most useful to understand. It is the upper-class relationship with authority. Most people raised without generational wealth were taught, explicitly or implicitly, that authority is a sleeping bear. You do not poke it. You say yes, sir, and no, ma'am, and you are grateful for whatever decision comes back. You treat every bureaucratic no as a final answer because challenging it feels dangerous. Challenging it feels like the behavior of someone who does not know their place. Upper-class people treat authority as a service provider. They do not ask for permission. They do not ask for clarification. They do not accept a no from a mid-level administrator as a final answer. They treat it as the opening position in a negotiation. They grew up at dinner tables where the principal and the senator and the CEO were referred to by first name. Not out of disrespect, but out of familiarity. They are not intimidated by institutions because they grew up understanding that institutions are made of people and people respond to confidence and clarity. The research on this is stark. A 2019 study from the University of California found that higher-income individuals were significantly more likely to advocate for themselves in medical settings and received measurably better care as a direct result. Not because doctors discriminated consciously, because self-advocacy changes outcomes in systems designed for people who use it. The takeaway is this: conciseness is the entry point. One of the most reliable lower-class behavioral signals is over-explanation, justifying why you need something, apologizing for the ask, building a defensive case before anyone has said no. Upper-class people make requests without preamble. They state what they need clearly and wait. I cannot make it is a complete sentence. Practice that. The fifth habit is the quality obsession, and it operates as a secret handshake between people who already belong. Upper-class people do not brag about what things cost. In many cases, they brag about how long things have lasted. The leather chair that belonged to a grandfather. The raincoat bought 20 years ago that still looks exactly right. The watch that a stranger would not look at twice, but that every person in the room who matters recognizes immediately. This is deliberate gatekeeping. The signal is designed to be invisible to people outside the tribe and immediately legible to people inside it. A giant logo announces wealth to strangers. A specific item from a specific maker announces membership to people who already know. The financial principle underneath this habit is more useful than the social one. Buying fewer things of genuine quality and using them for decades is almost always cheaper over time than buying many things of moderate quality and replacing them regularly. A $300 pair of shoes resold twice over 15 years costs less annually than a $60 pair replaced every 18 months. Upper-class people did not invent quality as an aesthetic preference. They arrived at it through a multi-generational understanding of what things actually cost across time. But here's where it gets interesting. The sixth habit is the one that explains everything else. And it is the one the competitor videos always under-explain because it is genuinely uncomfortable to say directly. Upper-class people are not braver than you. They are not more resilient. They are not built differently. They perform on the tightrope differently because they know there is a safety net 6 inches below them, made of family money, inherited connections, assets that survive mistakes, and a social ecosystem that catches people before they hit the ground. The boldness you are told to admire in upper-class risk-takers is largely the behavioral expression of consequence immunity. When failure does not mean losing your housing or your health insurance or your children's stability, failure becomes a data point rather than a catastrophe. And data points are useful. Catastrophes are paralyzing. This is not an argument for hopelessness. It is an argument for building your own version of the net before you perform tricks on the rope. The research on this is unambiguous. According to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, households with even a small financial buffer, 3 months of expenses in liquid savings, show dramatically lower rates of high-interest debt, better long-term investment behavior, and significantly higher rates of entrepreneurship than households without one. The net does not have to be generational. It has to be real. And it has to be built deliberately, 1 month of expenses at a time before you need it. So here is what you actually do with all of this. Stop over-explaining. Every time you justify a request before anyone has denied it, you are signaling uncertainty about whether you deserve what you are asking for. State what you need. Wait. That single behavioral shift changes how institutions and individuals respond to you faster than almost anything else. Start one future tense practice, 10 minutes a week. Not worry, planning. Where do you want to be in 5 years financially? What is the one decision available to you this month that serves that version of you? Upper-class people are not more strategic. They simply have more practice making the future feel real. Build the net before you need it. Not aggressively, not perfectly. 1 month of untouched expenses somewhere you cannot easily reach it. That single buffer changes your nervous system's relationship with risk in ways that no mindset shift ever could. Security is not a feeling, it is a number in an account. And finally, stop performing for people who are not watching. The upper class cracked this code generations ago. The most expensive thing most people own is the version of themselves they are trying to convince strangers they are. Every dollar redirected from performance to net worth is a dollar doing real work instead of social work. 6 habits. The costume of someone who has never needed clothes to do the talking. The future tense brain that security makes possible. The low urgency that a safety net produces. The authority relationship of someone who grew up inside the system. The quality obsession that is actually a long-term cost strategy. And the boldness that was never really courage. It was consequence immunity made visible. The hidden language of the upper class is not mysterious once you see the psychology underneath it. And the most useful thing about understanding it is not that it makes you want what they have. It is that it shows you exactly which parts of the code are available to you right now, and which parts are simply the performance of people who have never had to worry about the ground. But here is what nobody in this conversation ever asks. If the safety net is what produces the boldness, what happens to the people who build their own net from scratch, without the inheritance, without the connections, without the head start? What do they look like at 45? What did they do differently at 30 that nobody told them to do? That is exactly what the next video is about. And if this one gave you something real to think about, that one is going to give you something real to use.